Shalom from Jerusalem. This is Powers in Play, our monthly edition covering not only the region, the Middle East, but also the entire world and perhaps beyond, other galaxies, constellations, and the like. And our topic today comes out of the brilliant and creative Ukrainian operation against the remote air bases of the Russian Defense Forces, an operation conducted by drones, by so-called first-person air vehicles launched out of lorries, out of trucks in remote places in the Russian Federation. And the question which we are going to discuss is whether this is emblematic or even changes the entire calculus of power in the world. We used to talk about major powers, especially those having nuclear weapons, and permanent membership of the Security Council, and then some medium powers, regional powers, lesser powers. But now with even small nations, sub-national units or entities, and perhaps even small cells and individuals, they can have access to such weapons or tools which used to be only accessible to major powers. So let's discuss this. And we have Reserve Brigadier General Yossi Kuperwasser, formerly in charge of research and assessment for the Israeli Defense Forces Directorate of Military Intelligence, now a think tank president. Welcome, Yossi.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And retired Colonel Dr. Eran Lerman, also formerly a senior official with both the Director of Military Intelligence and the National Security Staff. Eran, another general, they are proliferating here.
Too many of them,
right. Reserve Brigadier General Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly of the Mossad intelligence agency, as well as the Director of Military Intelligence. Dr. Sofrin, welcome.
Hello.
And reserve ambassador and reserve politician, formerly the Deputy Foreign Minister, as well as ambassador to Washington, Danny Ayalon.
And also reserve captain in the idea.
Also reserve captain. That's very, if you behave properly,
the most important one.
Yes, we'll either promote you to major or demote you to lieutenant. General Kuperwasser, should we reclassify the powers of the world because of new technology and the accessibility of 3D printing, artificial intelligence, all of the new gizmos available?
No, I don't think we should reclassify the powers of the world, but I think that we should appreciate the fact that the capabilities of lesser powers are much more than what appears on paper. It's about creativity, as you said, and those who are able to identify the weaknesses and the gaps in the defense of their opponents can gain a lot of doing that. We don't have to go all the way to Ukraine. We can go back to 7th of October. We suffered ourselves the ability of our neighbor terrorist organization, Hamas, to come up with an idea that outsmarted us. And we were caught totally off guard and paid a very heavy price that had a strategic impact, way beyond what people could have thought before that is going to happen. And the same goes for in many other places. And what we did in vis-a-vis the Hezbollah with the pager operation is another example of how outsmarting your enemy can be effective. And this was done by a powerful side in the conflict. Nevertheless, if you are able to come up with creative ideas, this in many cases has strategic implication. It has the potential of becoming a turning point in a conflict. It doesn't matter if it comes from a strong force or a weak force. That said, the power that we always use in order to classify the capabilities are still very important. It's very nice to have the capability to outsmart your enemy, but you also have to be able to build on that and to carry on. And that's usually is the capability that is preserved for those greater powers.
Dr. Lemon, could you share with us the plight of the poor analyst working for an intelligence organization? Usually what they or you have to do is count the number of aircraft carriers, army divisions, airplanes, in order to tell your superior or the political echelon how powerful this enemy or perhaps even partner is.
Well, many years ago, we learned from a very impressive American the art of thinking in terms of net assessment. Net assessment does not simply mean adding up the numbers. This is why Israel, by the way, is guaranteed by American legislation and previously by American policy positions of its qualitative military edge and not its quantitative military edge. There's no prospect ever of matching the numbers of tanks or even aircraft in the aggregate of Arab forces, but there's always the capability to use force multipliers. And multipliers can be innovative technologies, rich small. They could be the extremely effective use of intelligence. And they can also have to do with the intangibles, like morale and dedication and perseverance. And I think that in the case of Ukraine, we are learning something very interesting. Once you cut off the nuclear layer, which is, of course, a totally unequal equation in this case. The Ukrainians, even if they ever had an option, they gave it up in Budapest, whereas the Russians have the largest pile of nuclear weapons anywhere. But once you take this off the table, and increasingly you are learning that nuclear power does not deter determined opponents from doing very dramatic things, including, by the way, Ukrainian, well before this daring raid, there was a Ukrainian invasion of Russian territory in the Kursk section. And once you take off the nuclear element, the Russian military is distinctly unimpressive. And once you throw in the force multipliers, including, and I say this very carefully, the probable support of very effective intelligence agencies, which are not necessarily Ukrainian, in helping the Ukrainians plan their operations, then you get a much more equal war than the Russians ever imagined it would be.
But by net assessment, you are now describing the process of getting all the non-quantitative factors into the equation. But doesn't the term mean theirs minus ours or vice versa?
Ultimately, yes, because the net assessment is not an intelligence function. Net assessment is a planning function initially created by Andrew Marshall for the American Cold War planners. But it rests on first of all, on an intelligence assessment, but also of intimate knowledge of your own side. I always used to say that the directors of military intelligence always had this deficiency, that for us, Israel was the dark side of the moon. We knew very little about our own side. But then this is what you need, integrative agencies within the defense establishment and at the national level, like the National Security Staff, that can have a look at the blue and the red, or the red and the blue.
That's a necessity.
John Sofrin, let me take issue with what Iran just said about the dark side, all of that. It seems that one of the problems for the Israeli military intelligence chiefs is that they are too intimately involved with the operational side of the house, and therefore they instinctively believe that even if they fail, their colleagues around the general staff table will be able to close the gap, to be able, yes, Hamas or President Sadat may give the order, but our guys will be bold and strong and creative enough to repel them.
You know, there are 2 points of view that you can look at that. The first one is what we call the traditional one that says you have a risk and you prepare to give the right answer for the risk. That's usually what is being done in Israel, what we call risk management. Let's say that we know that in Gaza there are about 30,000 people belonging to Hamas military wing, and they are equipped with all kinds of weapon systems, but we'll get an early warning on time when they try to do something.
Because you have to prioritize and you must assign your forces.
Not only that, otherwise you should keep along the fence of Gaza Strip, the old fence. Prior to October 7, you have to keep at least 2 or 3 brigades deployed, and you don't have the capability to do so. The other one is to be prepared for what we call any extreme scenario. That means regardless, early warning indications, and don't rely only on the early warning that you will give or get from the military intelligence or other agencies, doesn't really matter. And you have to be prepared 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all along the year. This is also problematic because, you know, when the routine has its own implications. You lose your readiness, you become more tangible, you become more easy.
And also, it's a sort of attrition where your enemy
of course.
makes you tired.
And on the other side, has the advantage that it plans and it decides exactly when to implement it, the date and the minute, okay? And they did it very well on October 7. We were misled. We didn't understand what is happening on the other side. And they prepared very carefully and very even Muhammad Def, who planned what we call the last days, said that the timetable should be as follows. 5 days before, we will get the final decision for the green light, okay, for the date. Then 48 hours before, the brigade commanders will receive the orders, battalion commanders 24 hours ahead, and the soldiers at the field who has to implement the attack 2 hours before. That's it.
That's like Anwar Sadat on October the 6th,
Exactly.
1973.
You can make a full comparison between those two failures and find a lot of similarities.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ambassador Alon, we see that the Trump administration is putting a lot of emphasis on defense, homeland defense, the Golden Dome for America. They are deploying even regular troops to the Mexican border, and now, of course, to support immigration enforcement in Los Angeles. But this must come at the expense of offense and therefore deterrence. How do they see operations such as the Ukrainian drone attack, because this can be also launched, even by drug cartels out of Mexico, which are now under attack by the United States?
Right. Well, I would say that from a operational point of view, intelligence, execution, I think they are very impressed. No one cannot be impressed with the Ukrainian operation. But the US, which still under Trump wants to be the superpower of the world, looks ahead. And actually, when they talk about let's say, defense, they, I would say, bank a lot on technology, like the Iron Dome or the Golden Dome. Also, Trump is thinking of using the space, out of space. You know, until now, there was a understanding, more than understanding, that the outer space is not to be used for military purposes, but Trump is beginning to think of actually taking any potential enemy by actually bringing him down through technology.
But he first wants to test it by launching Elon Musk into space.
That's right. That is right. But one of the things is, for instance, is the laser technology, which he believes that through laser that they control the entire globe. But I would like to say that there are two issues here that when we talk about asymmetric wars, many, go back to the pirates of the 17th century, where the high powers of the time, instead of confronting the pirates in the high seas, they denied them safe haven, so they couldn't really dock at any port, replenish, resupply, and rest. And our new ports of today are failed countries, whether it's Somalia or Chad or Yemen. And so the issue here is that technology is not enough. You have also to have political administration. You have to have alliances that could actually not only signal out, but also separate and isolate areas of terror, like the Houthis, like in Somalia, and all that. And until now, I would say that the Trump administration has lacked very much in organizing international coalitions.
General Kupperwasser, the threats which Israel has faced throughout its almost 80 years of existence started by infiltration by Palestinians who wanted either to go back to their homes or to rob the Israeli settlers of their possessions. And then when they were repelled or blocked, we started receiving artillery shells, Katyusha rockets, and so on and so forth. Now, more recently, we have been victims of stabbing attacks, ramming attacks, which means that individuals can infiltrate or act even without the knowledge of organizations or the Palestinian Authority. And what happened in the drone attack may encourage individuals, let's say in Jenin, or anywhere in Gaza, even after Hamas is beaten down, to take a drone or another weapon and on their own launch an attack. What can be done about it, even if, for instance, the Palestinian Authority has what Menachem Begin used to call a strong local police, and they are trying to enforce the agreement with Israel on the population? It only takes 1,000th of the 2 million strong population in Gaza to have 2,000 homegrown terrorists. What can be done?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that there is no foolproof. And these things may happen. And they happen all the time. As you described the history is a history of an ongoing competition of learning. And we are not the only side that learns. The other side learns as well. And that's why the situation changes all the time and the kind of threats we have to face change all the time. That said, we should learn the lessons that, first of all, we should have access to any piece of land where these threats may emanate from. And the lesson learned in the context of Gaza and of Judea and Samaria is that Israel should have the freedom to operate in all these places militarily in order to thwart any attempt to carry out such terror attacks against us. Look, just yesterday, if I remember correctly, we found a laboratory in Tulkarem where there had already 35 explosive charges prepared and waiting to be operated. We have to be able to reach these places, and based on good intelligence that we have to nurture all the time, we have to be able to locate these places ahead of their use and prevent the other side from doing that. And we should have more red teams to think, what would the enemy do? One of the problems we did have before October 7th was that we didn't have a dedicated red team that would think, okay, we managed to close the capability to operate through the underground tunnels. What are they going to do next? Actually, we knew what they were going to do next because we had the Jericho Wall planned, but we ignored it. But we could have reached it.
When you say we, who are we? Not the top echelon, not even the top military
No,
echelon.
but somebody in the Israeli intelligence system knew about it. They didn't do enough. Okay, but that's
Up to the divisions level,
yeah,
including,
including the divisions level.
of course.
But I think that one of the lessons learned in this context is that don't be complacent. That the enemy is learning, the enemy is going to implement something new, because this is something we have to remember, and I think Iran touched upon it a little bit. It's not only that they are capable of coming up with new ideas. There's a lot of ideological fervor behind it. And this makes them committed to keep on learning, because they have to find a way to overcome the obstacles we put in front of them. And that's why these people don't like the idea of a forever war. But I don't think that we have the luxury of putting an end to this war. This war is going to be for a long period of time. I don't know if forever, but for a long period of time. We have to be prepared to face new threats from the enemy and maintain the freedom of operation in all the territories where this enemy resides. And it can happen in the Judea and Samaria area, it can happen in Gaza, it can happen also from certain elements within the Arabs living inside Israel. We have Jerusalem, we have to bear that in mind as well.
Taking the cliche, which also gave its name to a rock band, necessity is the mother of invention. We used to believe that this was a Yiddish mama, a Jewish mother. But maybe we grew complacent, as Yossi said, because we are not that poor. We have resources, and when you have resources, you're not that resourceful.
I think we've been actually quite innovative in many fields. To some extent, we may have overly relied on innovation, technology, AI, units that integrate these capabilities into their operations, and a bit less than necessary on the old raw capacity of organized ground forces. But having said this, there's always this cycle of learning that General Kobavasa referred to. I'm rereading now Ed Luttwak's strategy.
Roman Empire.
No, a strategy in which he talks about the ever-present paradox that strategic developments are never linear. There's action and counteraction, and then the French thought in the turn of the previous century that the little torpedo boats would obviate the need for the big ships. Turns out that wasn't the case, and the drones are not going to make the rest of military capabilities irrelevant. You find solutions to drones which are also can be quite interesting and sophisticated.
But drones may, perhaps unjustifiably, encourage some enemy of Israel to launch an attack against a strategic infrastructure target in the Negev or elsewhere.
They have to be much better defended, and counter-drone technology is as important. And by the way, quite a number of Israeli companies have gone into anti-drone technology even before drones were demonstrated, as they have been in recent years. And in fact, drones are initially an Israeli innovation in the battlefield, much more so than any other.
In the late 1960s, early 1970s.
And moreover, I would say that the Israelis who underestimated the capabilities of the IDF in the battlefield, in Gaza, for example, let's leave names out of it, but there were some old line generals who thought the IDF is going to be roundly defeated there, because they were still thinking in two-dimensional ways. But Hamas was fighting a two-dimensional war against a three-dimensional IDF with very clear results. Once we got over the shock.
But they're underground facilities.
Four-dimensional even. So you learn steadily. We didn't have the slightest idea what to do underground. For years, we did fight an underground war in 70-71 in Gaza, but that was a very primitive Viet Cong-like system that was destroyed. We relearned the whole trade. We've taken heavy losses, but we've learned to fight underground.
Only on this war.
On this,
General Sofrin, the pager attack, which General Kupperwasser mentioned, was perfected through several years by various branches of the Israeli defense establishment, obviously Mossad, the Air Force, the communications units, the operation division of the General Staff. And there is always this debate of whether you keep it for the war or use it in the middle of some decade for fear that it will be obsolete before you can use it. But if you do it too soon, maybe you disclosed a strategic asset. How does such a debate, how is it conducted? How is it decided?
Think about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we thought that we should develop some what we call secret weapon systems that to be used only in case of what we call a specific war. Now, reality is stronger than anything else. And that means that if you fight in Gaza and you spoil everything you had, and suddenly you have to find out something new. And then you consider, should I take this, what we call a secret system that I developed only to be used against the Syrian army at the Golan Heights and use it in Gaza for these few terrorists that are running in the streets, or not? And the decision was to use it in Gaza as well. Now, the minute you begin using that, it's no longer a secret. And that means that many systems that we then did to develop over the years for this kind of future war with the huge Syrian army that was always the biggest threat.
Precision guided munitions.
Yeah.
the
Ever since
late but not lamented Syrian army.
No, not yet. Recovering in a different way. But nevertheless, it is still there, part of it. And that means that, you have always this debate, and you have to consider whether to use it or not, because, for example, we had a lot of systems that were stored in what we call for preparing for war, for the reserve units to come and pick it up and get out to war. And suddenly you find out that you are short of resources on the daily fighting. And then you consider and say, okay, when the reservists...
You cannibalize.
Yeah, when the reservists will come, they will find other systems, we'll find other systems and other solutions, but nevertheless, we'll take it out and use it right now. And that's what happens all the time.
Not only that, but in 1973, there were only, as you well remember, you've been there, only 2 elite regular infantry brigades. They each had their turns, their watches. They each stole from each other. And when war came, there was no ammunition for the soldiers.
No, not to that extent, no.
Okay.
This
is folklore, legend.
Kind of a legend.
Danny, Israel has been getting, especially since the late 1970s, Camp David and the annual assistance, then enshrined in law, and with a memorandum of understanding, which is to expire 3 years from now. Israel has been getting almost $5 billion a year. And we have gotten used to it. The defense dollars, the US defense dollars, are being spent on major systems. And we have our own shekels to invest in what Amnon just recounted. But if this MOU and the entire idea of American assistance are going to be cut, what will happen to the Israeli habit of investing only in our own secrets?
Well, we may have some withdrawal, symptoms, but I think maybe the overall idea of not relying on dole, You cannot call it anything else but dole from the United States, which was very necessary in the 70s, 80s, maybe even until mid-90s. I'm not sure this is very much necessary today, except that there is always a counter-argument that it's the significance, it's the symbolic effect of the, not just reliance, but this unbreakable bond between Israel and the United States. But I think today, even after this Gaza war, our security budget or our defense expenses do not exceed 7% of our GDP. During the 70s.
But the entire battle of the budget is being conducted on what you may call the margins.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We haven't seen any political party give up anything because the defense budget.
And certainly not the military. You talk about the military, this is for them, it's an anathema. They don't even want to discuss it. But at the end of the day, if you look from a real strategic point of view, is this money, Israel is not dependent on this money. Quite the contrary. I think if we will have less easy money coming from the United States, it may bring us to be more innovative, to bring more of the innovation here and production here and not in the United States.
No politician is going to go on an election campain and tell them, yes, we should have less.
But Amir, they may have no other choice.
To the voters, not to Congress.
But there's no choice. It's not their decision. It would be, let's say, in 2 years, it will be Trump's decision. And I think we should certainly brace for doing that. And if you talk about this asymmetric war, just one more point is the economic perspective. Since, until now, when we use Arrow missiles or even Iron Dome, which cost in the thousands of dollars against, a few $100s of the incoming Qassam and the terrorist rockets, this is indeed unbalanced and can really dry up your resources. So I think the idea is, again, going back to technology where laser can be the answer.
John Kupperwasser, when you were at the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, one of your concerns was legitimacy, global legitimacy. And there was a time back in the 70s when Israel had partners, not all of them out in the open, like Singapore or South Africa, before the regime changed there. Does the war on Israel's legitimacy have an impact on Israel's ability to collaborate with other countries in the defense domain?
It may have such impact. I don't think it already has, but it's brewing. It might happen, maybe unfortunately sooner than later. And we see it, especially with the French. They speak about it. Germans mention it here and there. It might have some implications. The Spaniards have already cut all kinds of deals that
they are far enough from Russia to afford it.
Yes, it might have an impact. Fortunately, what we produce is very highly appreciated by everybody, and everybody wants to have some of it. So the cooperation with Israel in military affairs, both buying Israeli products and cooperating with Israel and defending itself, is not an immediate threat, but it may happen because we unfortunately quite neglect this front. We don't put enough effort in convincing people that what we're doing is good for them. It's on their behalf, not only on our behalf. They have to feel that they have to understand that.
Can you really win the war on hearts and minds as the Americans tried in Vietnam?
First of all, I believe we can do better. I don't know if we can win, but we can do better than what we have done so far. We haven't done well enough. And we can at least prevent a deterioration, a collapse. And that's something that's critical for Israel's security. And as I said, really, not only for Israel's security, it's important for the West. Look, the feeling that Israel is a genocidal country has an impact on the situation in many places around the globe, including the United States. And look at what's happening in the universities and so on. It's not something that stops in Israel. It has an impact on everybody. And because of that, I think it's important that we should find people that can be our allies in this war. And it's not easy. I listened yesterday to J.D. Vance, the vice president. He was not denying outrightly the claims of the Palestinians about the suffering of the Palestinians. And I would expect him to be more decisive and clear on that message. And yes, when the world is now more affected by people who have different opinions than ours and are critical of Israel, it's a problem, and the numbers speak.
But when in the councils of war in Israel, first the general staff, the planners of the general staff, and then the other senior staff, such as yourself, when you were retired from the military, and finally the cabinet, when they consider various options, is this a consideration, or only after the fact they find that they neglected it?
It is a consideration. It is, but the question is what
It's not implied. It's not implied.
No, it's implied. But what weight do you give to that? And we don't give enough weight, in my mind. The weight we give to that is
It's what we call the final priority.
Yeah. So look, when I was in the military, we started, even when I was the chief intelligence officer of Central Command, we already started understanding the implications of what's going to happen. And the Durban summit,
Anti-Zionist.
anti-Zionist summit in 2001 was a clear message of what was coming. And the Marmara and everything that happened following that were all lights on the board that telling us that something bad is happening. And the government paid attention to that. But the government thought that this can be dealt with by allocating something like 10 million shekels to the program.
Or sending Ambassador Elon to Congress to plead our case.
Yeah, that was the
got a lot of plus-ups from Congress.
I can tell you that today we spend much more, but still it's much less than what's necessary.
Yeah.
I think that the time has come for us to actually seriously consider the future of our relationship with the United States, and in that context also the relationship with American allies. We do not belong on the other side of the world, and anyone who entertains this kind of fantasy.
There's only one other side?
Chinese. It's at the end of the day. Russia is on its way sliding towards becoming a Chinese satrapy. I'm telling this to the Russians to their faces. But
When they are sober?
Some of them are very sober. Putin doesn't drink. No, seriously. But I think I've written a piece on this for JSS, and it's recently come out in both languages. The time has come for us to start thinking in terms of decades ahead, in the same way that we shed systemically, slowly, and gradually the ESF, the Economic Support Fund. We should consider moving from dole to deeply structured cooperation. We have, unfortunately, because we are constantly on the battlefield, we have things to bring to the relationship that that can be very significant for decades to come. I'll say one thing: the American military, at the highest levels, and certainly at the lower level, they knew nothing of us. The highest level was very anti-Israeli in the 50s, 60s. It saw us essentially as a burden. Today, at the most elementary level, people are colonels now who are captains in Iraq, and they have their legs and their hands because of Israeli solutions to the IED problem. Because we learned the hard way what to do with IEDs. And that's just an example of many, many other things that have happened. It has transformed the relationship. If you go around in Washington and in Jerusalem trashing the deep state, you have a problem. If you cherish what the deep states of both countries have to say to each other, it's a different matter.
One last point, General Sofrin. There are UN and other international forces. Sometimes they're only intended as tripwires, as a pretext for the regimes to tell their populations why they cannot attack Israel. But sometimes they are trying to control the borders or at least the lines of separation. But if there are now such new threats, such as the drones, which can be used by people across from the border, what is the utility of such forces? But
I think it's
be
more
very,
symbolic.
very
I
short.
think it's more symbolic than any other thing. That means that the presence of them is to have an effect on the population, not on anything, not on the leadership, and not on anybody else. Nobody really consider very carefully or take very seriously the function of the UNIFIL or other elements of the military.
Andov, which is now being extended
Right, right.
in the
So
Golan Heights.
the fact is that, first of all, they are there for symbolic missions. They don't really take any real advantage or really active against what you call threats, and they are busy maintaining their own life and getting back safely and not being killed here in the Middle East.
Amnon Sofrin, let me reassure you that your presence here is not symbolic, it's substantial. Thank you very much. Thank you, Danny Ayalon, Ran Lerman, and Yossi Kupperwasser. This has been Powers in Play for the month of June. We will be back with another edition from TV7 News in Israel. For the time being, shalom from Jerusalem.